Do you agree with the city's ban on marijuana dispensaries? If you disagree with the ban, what steps would you take as an elected official to reform current marijuana policies?
Well, I think when you're talking about, as I say, I'm a representative of the constituents who elected me to this position. My personal views on this particular issue, I believe, are really irrelevant. I don't smoke marijuana. I don't particularly care for it, but again, that's irrelevant. That's not my function as an elected official. My function as an elected official is to step out of whatever personal views I may hold and focus on what the interests are of that particular constituency that I represent. And in that capacity, certainly at this particular time, there is not widespread community support at this time for legalization or allowing marijuana based operations in the city. But that said, I think things do change. I think that as time goes by, I have noticed that some individuals that were very much opposed to it in the past have started to realize that this might be a way for the city to not only address crime. When you prohibit something and criminalize something, it sometimes it tends to make the situation worse, not better. And I think from a public policy perspective, that's what we're dealing with. I mean, you can go back and look at the period of prohibition in this country when we outlawed the manufacture, distribution, sale of alcohol. And it created, we talk about Al Capone, we talk about, the mob and, how they more or less cornered the industry. Okay, so until very recently, it's been very difficult to really enforce the laws. You can certainly create a law, but enforcing it is another question. That requires resources, that requires money, that requires officers, that requires prosecutions. And I think that's where the city has suffered because we simply don't have the resources, even though we do have the bans in place. We have not until recently worked to develop the resources we need to actually enforce it. So I think this is a debate that's going to continue. We're going to see, I know there's currently legislation at the state level. It was very interesting to watch the Republican debates the other night. The issue of marijuana came up, and I know that many states are now grappling with the fact that there's differences in terms of the federal law, state law. We're seeing the shift now, more states legalizing and permitting regulated usage of and sale of marijuana-based products. So I anticipate this debate's not going away, and I think it's something that we as a city will have to continually revisit. And as these laws transform, I certainly think there's opportunities down the road, perhaps. But we do need to balance. We need to make sure that the public interest is protected. I get a lot of complaints about dispensaries. I actually went out with code enforcement. I visited some of these places. They can be a bit spooky, and they do tend to attract a crowd that is not really beneficial to the communities that they're operating in. We are enforcing to the degree we can the prohibition, but what we find is sort of like whack-a-mole. As soon as one shuts down, they move, they open up somewhere else, and it takes several months to then shut them down, and they just simply move around. So I think the prohibition is something we're going to have to look at very seriously, and I do know that we will be looking at it as a council within the next month or so. It's something we're just going to continually be revisiting, and as I said, as state and federal laws change, which I fully anticipate they will, we're going to have to, as policymakers, be very in tune, and not just as policymakers, but as residents, as people throughout the city. I think it's important for our public to be engaged in this debate and to become educated on it. I mean, there's pros and cons, there's revenue generating potential, but there's also the fact that we need to protect our young people, we need to protect our communities, and it's finding that balance and how we're going to do that that's going to be the key to addressing an issue that is shifting at the state and federal level right now.